Welcome to the Agoracom CEO Small Cap Leadership Series. This is a production of Agoracom in which we interview CEOs and management from great companies that are really doing great things in the small cap space. With us today is Rob McLeod. He's President and CEO of IDM Mining. Trades on the big board TSX under the stock symbol IDM. With us also, as always, is our Chief Market Commentator, Alan Barry Laboucan. Alan is going to lead the charge with respect to the technical side of IDM because they put out some fantastic technical information. The company's main project is the Red Mountain project near Stewart, British Columbia. Rob, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here, boys. Thanks for having me, despite tough markets, which I'm sure everybody's tired of talking about or hearing.
Well, it's part and parcel with the conversation we're going to have today, and that's why at the end of the day we've got you on what we call this leadership series, because despite the fact that that's tough markets, you're raising money, you're putting out news with respect to PEAs and things like that, and that's why we've got you on. So I'm going to hand the reins over first to Alan, or actually first, Rob, why don't you give us just a good summary of the Red Mountain project and what's happened, and then we're going to really do a deep dive into the meat and potatoes with Alan on the technical side. But you've done some amazing things there. Give us a 30-second summary before we get right into it.
Yeah, sure. Red Mountain is a high-grade gold project located near my hometown of Stewart, British Columbia, and really there's a real duality to the story. Number one, we have a high-grade resource that has had in excess of $40 million spent on it. Advanced drilling, metallurgical test work. We've recently completed a PEA that show very favorable economics, but at the same time, we believe it's only the tip of the iceberg. It's a very large property. It's a large mineralizing system, and we think there's tremendous exploration potential on the property as well. So it's in a great jurisdiction, and it's got the grade that can survive tougher gold markets like the one we're in today.
Yeah, and George, I kind of wanted to put things into a little bit of perspective as to why I invited Rob onto the show. One of the reasons is Rob comes from a well-pedigreed family in the mining business. I'll probably mess it all up. I've followed his cousin, Catherine McLeod Seltzer's career closely since the 90s when they had the fabulous success with Agoracom Resources that was a 30-cent stock that ended up being a $30 stock and was taken over by Barrick. So why don't you put it into a little bit of context about your family too, Rob?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Very proud of the family history. My grandfather immigrated from Scotland in 1925 and went to work in the mines actually in the Stewart area. That only lasted for a couple of years because he went into the hotel business. As many of us in the mining business know, you make more money selling booze to the miners than you do mining gold. And my father and my uncle were both underground miners post-World War II in the Stewart area. My dad, Ian, went on to become mayor of Stewart after his mining career was over, and businessman continuing on with the same hotel and bar business. And his brother, Don McLeod, was a really successful mining promoter through the 70s, 80s, and 90s with a lot of discoveries to his credit. He built, small, high-grade gold mines similar to what we have envisioned at Red Mountain. And his son and daughter, Bruce and Catherine McLeod, as you've said, have gone on to be quite successful mining promoters as well. So I'm the geologist in the family. I grew up in Stewart, BC, so I've been around mining my whole life. And, when I was a teenager, I'd look at my Uncle Don and the fun he'd have promoting junior mining, and I knew it was something that I always wanted to do.
Now let's not sell you short, because if I'm not mistaken, back in 2010, you sold the White Gold project to Kinross Gold for over $100 million, correct?
Yeah, correct. That was a real exciting discovery. And hey, we were coming out of the crash of 2008. We had a nice recovery in early 2009, but it was interesting. It was discoveries such as at White Gold and later, East Asia Minerals was pretty hot at the time. Looking at the market in 2009, it was was kind of a nice recovery on the back heels of discovery. But yeah, that was a real quick discovery to take out story. We're really proud of what we accomplished there.
Actually, that's where I first became aware of you, Rob, was because the company you had, I forget the name of the company, but I started featuring it in my Allen Berry reports, I think from the very first holes you guys got out of there. And like you said, what's that?
With Underworld?
Underworld, yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very long before it was a takeover. So, yeah, you're with the McLeod clan there as success stories as well.
Well, we're Scottish, we're not Irish, but we'll take some of the luck that comes along with it.
Okay,
any day.
And if I may, I'll tell you guys why I think this is important too to have this conversation. One of my biggest beefs with what I think a big contributor to the downfall of the small cap junior space was this runaway model where, you know, George and Alan, a bunch of guys with no experience in the industry, got together, staked some property, sold some 5-cent paper to their friends, promoted the story to 10, 15, 20, 25 cents, made a lot of people a lot of money in the short term. But now we've got all these dormant zombie companies lying around because these people just don't know. They don't have the pedigree. They don't know what it means, what it takes to actually create a real business. And I think that's what's hampered the small cap space and caused a lot of damage. So that's why I thought it was so important, Rob, to bring that up, because the pedigree, the success in the family, your success, we need more of those. And I'm glad to have 500 or 700 or 800 companies in the small cap space go by way of the dodo bird and just keep around the 100, 150 high quality companies with people who really know what they're doing, as opposed to people who just want to sell paper. So with that in mind there,
let's get on to some of the technical parts of it, George. And that was the second reason that I wanted Rob on the show was, every project that's led to a significant discovery in my career, going back to the early 90s, they all have each project has a bit of a unique story. And this Red Mountain project, Rob has a unique story regarding this one. So why don't you get into that a little bit for us, Rob?
Sure. Well, as I said, I'm a geologist. When I graduated from UBC in 1993, my first job straight out of school was exploring at Red Mountain, and it was for a major at the time, Lac Minerals. And it was a really hot discovery. It was found in 1989, and Lac at the time was being hotly pursued by Barrick and later by Royal Oak. So as part of their defense mechanism, they wanted to get Red Mountain into production as quickly as possible. So they spent a great deal of money advancing the project. Lac eventually was taken over by Barrick before the mine got built. And they ended up selling it to the other suitor, Royal Oak Mines, who eventually went bankrupt. And just through a matter of changing hands a few times and just due to a bunch of different circumstances, the project hadn't received any exploration, basically since any surface exploration for 20 years. So when I've always had the project in the back of my mind. We had a lot of great exploration targets back in the 90s that we didn't get a chance to follow up. But when I came back out this spring, I was absolutely blown away by how much ice had melted surrounding the property. Northwest BC is famous for glaciers, high snowfall area. And what we do mostly as geologists is to try to see underneath overburden, to look for a high-grade discovery. If there's a big quartz vein with gold sticking out of the ground, it's probably been found. But where there's a unique opportunity at Red Mountain is the glacial ice is pulled back on the order of kilometers. And so far this year, in a few of our news releases, we've announced a series of discoveries, a couple of which we've recently completed drilling. Now, the glacial melt has led to a bunch of other discoveries in northwestern BC, the most significant of which is the Valley of the King Zone at Pretium, arguably.
George, you'll know Pretium. I've talked about it a lot.
Sure, related to Garibaldi. He's got a close connection to Garibaldi resources there.
There you go.
Well,
no, Pretium. George, Pretium is the one that got hammered with the resource calculation. They had to redo it. Remember, the stock got hammered down to like 350 or something like that, and I
You
said,
and I were arguing, and you banged the table, and the rest is history.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I think it's going to be one of the high Pretium in their Valley of the Kings zone is going to be one of the richest mines in the world. Period.
Wow.
To get that collection of gold and those grades on a global scale is very, very unique. And just your
By the
idea.
way, Rob, that's fabulous high grade is very unique, but the whole region you're in is also quite unique for that high grade. There's been the Eskay Creek mine up there, others that.
SK is probably the richest mine anywhere, even richer than Red Lake, Ontario, in the modern era. And my exact numbers might not be correct, but I've heard 9 million ounces of gold equivalent, and it's equal silver and gold from about 1.3 million tons. So it's a small ore body, but fabulously rich. The Premier mine, I don't know if you guys saw today some of the results that our neighbor Ascot Resources pulled off at the Premier mine north of Stewart.
I did.
13,000 grams per ton over 3/4 of a meter. You get some just smoking grades, and you get big deposits as well too. Seabridge's massive KSM project with tens of millions of ounces.
George knows that. George has been following that one for years.
Well,
Yeah,
they were a client of Agoracom back when nobody knew about them in the $10-12 range. Ran U.S. programs on CNBC for them. So we did some good work with them, and I've never forgotten about that story. I've bought in and out of it a few times actually.
yeah, it's and what they're working on with Deep Pur, it's a equal part gold and copper. I think will be the largest mine in northwestern BC. So you have big deposits, and you also have really high grade ones. Now back to Pretium in the Valley of the Kings, just in terms of a bit of a personal story, my uncle Don McLeod actually used to have that property in the late 1980s during the Eskay Creek rush. And they knew of the Valley of the Kings prospect as a bunch of float at the bottom of an ice field that carried a whole bunch of coarse gold. So they knew that somewhere under the glacier there was something quite rich. Now, Silver Standard took over Newhawk in the early, I think it was 92, for the cash in the bank, and they basically did nothing with the property until the mid-2000s. When they came back out, the ice sheet was gone, and there's visible gold all over the place. So, it's a bit of a question of timing. And here, my uncle was with a successful company that, was chasing a modest ore body that was parallel with the Valley of the King zone. It's just, and he reminds me and my fellow geologists all the time that if we drilled the other way, we would have drilled into the thing. So, and also it's finally there's many examples, but the Mitchell zone, the M part of the KSM, back when Placer Dome had the property, I actually worked there as a student. It was also underneath an ice sheet as well. So, hey, whether or not you're a believer in global warming, the glaciers are certainly melting, and they're exposing all sorts of good stuff. And at IDM, at Red Mountain, we've discovered 2 new high-grade zones that we call Uxlux and Y-Loop that we've just put a bunch of drill holes in, and we should be announcing the results fairly shortly.
But let's stick with that, and maybe Alan, this is where you want to, for everyone watching at home. You put out a preliminary economic assessment back in August. You had some really great numbers attached to that. I mean, I've read the press release. I've got some notes, but Rob, I don't know if you want to go through some of those numbers because they're pretty important, or Al, you want to go through those numbers, and then let's discuss the feasibility of all that and timelines. That's what I'd really like to get into, and people at home should know about it.
Rob, why don't you go into that, and then we'll start. Then I'll start asking some questions about where we are today and what you're working on right now.
Sure. Well, an important part of the structure of IDM is we work very closely with a boutique engineering firm in Vancouver and in Kelowna, and actually all over North America, called JDS Mining and Energy. And to many of your viewers that follow the business, you'll see that JDS has suddenly become involved in a bunch of different projects, particularly ones that are in the north, particularly ones with higher grades. They, in my opinion, are the best thing to happen to the mining engineering industry, I guess, in the past decade. They focus on getting deposits into production quickly, cheaply, safely, and as profitably as possible.
You know,
Um,
Rob, just to put it into context for George, why that's so important on these extremely high grade discoveries is that in a traditional sense, it's difficult to get a resource calculation because you can't put the holes together like you can in a big, wide ore body. And so you need that expertise, and I think that that's what Rob's alluding to here.
Well, sure, and one of the tendencies, particularly over the past bull market, is a lot of engineering firms actually way over engineer. They keep increasing the scope of these projects so much that your indirects render so many good deposits uneconomic. They focus on making money and kind of cutting things down to the bare bones. And an example at Red Mountain, the biggest challenge to any project in Northwest BC is dealing with the weather, and in particular the heavy snowfall. So their concept was to avoid a lot of the capital costs. The previous owner thought about a 7-kilometer long access tunnel. That's at least $35 million to build. Why not shut down for 2 or 3 months of the heaviest snowfall period and send the miners off to Mexico to drink tequila over the December through kind of February heaviest snowfall period, and you save all of that capex. So in July, we announced our preliminary economic assessment. And, this is just through working through a bunch of the great engineering work that was done by the previous operators that we had access to all those files. And it showed for a low capex, and including a 15% contingency at $76 million, we could have a pre-tax internal rate of return of 43.3% and a pre-tax NPV of $90.1 million, and that's using $1,250 gold price. And
How fast of a payback on that capex cost?
1.5 years.
yeah, that would be 1.5 years. So it's a quick payback. Now, to look on what could be some of our challenges, it has a 5-year mine life. So a lot of guys might look at that, oh, well, that's pretty quick. Now, if you look at historically at most gold deposits in North America over the past, 50, 60 years, particularly back in the old days, mines would start with a modest resource. And then here we are, 30, 40 years later, and they're still going. A buddy of mine worked at the Hoyle Pond mine in Timmins. They started with 350,000 ounce resource, and I think they've mined pretty close to 4 million ounces there. Red Mountain is such a big system, we're confident we're going to find more resources. But we have enough there to mine for 5 years, and if you can consider the 2 years it would take to get it permitted and built, that gives you 7 years to find additional resources. So let's just go for it, and the additional ounces will come.
In fact, Rob, is this the new business model for the junior mining space, that the days of $1 billion capex are pretty much done for now, and it's easier to get financing for a 5-year, $76 million mine than it is to for $1 billion 20-year?
The hard part, George, is to find them that have these kind of numbers.
Yeah, but they're out there. What I've noticed is in the past, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've noticed in the past, 5, 8 years, these smaller deposits almost got ignored. People almost, thumbed their nose at them because they're too small and they wanted big. I guess that's because the investment bankers, at the end of the day, if they're going to raise money, they want to raise as much money as possible, as much commission as possible. But now it seems like Avalon Rare Metals, even though they're not in the precious metal space, they're a classic example. They've got a fantastic rare metals deposit, but it's going to cost $2 billion plus to build it out, and they can't get that money. So now they got to sit and wait for the market to turn in the next year, 2, 5 years. Whereas now it seems like things like IDM, I think look like they have a. And Rob, you tell us what the landscape is. The door's a little more open for bite-sized projects like this that can expand.
Oh yeah, 100% true. And through if we can kind of navel gaze throughout the whole industry, from the biggest miners in the world, gold space such as Agoracom, right down to the smallest juniors, we were all looking for metal in the ground. We weren't looking for the money in the ground. Mining should be about making money, not necessarily about making metal. So these marginal deposits, even though they'd have like a large billion-dollar net present value, the rates of return would be small, 11 or 12%. And as the metal prices have pulled back, all of these things, they're not economic, let alone the billions of dollars of capex to make. So now, you know, and I got lots of colleagues that work for producers. The producers are looking for high grade, low capex, quick payback, easy to reclaim, less environmental footprint. These higher grade deposits make money, and that's where there is more attention on the projects, such as like IDM, or you can look at other ones like Integra or Rox Gold. These other juniors that have modest capexes and should have good rates of return. They're attracting the capital, and you know, particularly the private equity firms that are out there that I've been canvassing, they like these type of projects. They can deploy $25 million and have a substantial ownership in a junior company, whereas before that you would just be a rounding error for these multi-billion capex projects, right?
And sorry, go ahead. Sorry, finish that point, Rob.
Yeah, it's, you know, with some other buddies, and even though we just completed $2.5 million financing, which I've never had to hustle like I had to, you know, get the last few pennies that are out there for the junior world. It's easier to raise 25 million to build a mine than it is to raise $2.5 million to drill it. So it's that money is out there to build these type of projects.
And a couple of numbers for everyone at home that are watching. So it's a $76 million capital cost. Operating costs are about $516 per ounce. We said payback is 1.5 years in after-tax dollars, which I think is pretty incredible. And production would be around 55,000 ounces of gold and 170,000 ounces of silver, and it would take 2 years to build the mine. So I just want to give everyone the numbers to put that into context. And I don't know, 5 years ago that would have been almost laughed at and ignored, and today it seems like people want a piece of that. Alan, what do you think? I mean, you got more experience than me.
Well, you know, George, at the end of the day, I'm 100% in agreement with Rob about where the industry has gone. You know, for a long time, it was just about getting more ounces on your books in resources and reserves when it came to the big gold companies, and it wasn't so much about could you make money on that. And I've always been, you know, how do you make money on these things? I look at something like that, you know, that project, you cut a check for $75 million, you get your money back in 1.5 years. The next 3.5 years, you're making nothing but money, and hopefully they keep finding new stuff with the drill hole. That's the way the mining business had operated for many years. You know, so some of these things that have happened recently, I don't really. I think it's more important to find ounces you can get out of the ground and make money off of, just like what Rob said.
I guess egos got in the way. The bankers want to make more commission. The geologists and the CEOs want these big monster numbers credited to them.
Is a lot of the big mining companies, instead of being run by rock guys like Rob, they became run by accountants and bean counters, and they like to see those big numbers, right? They can crunch those numbers and, oh, we got 100 million ounces and blah, 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 but they don't understand what guys like Rob do, and so, you know, that's where I stand on the issue. I'm in complete agreement with Rob.
So, Rob, what's next now? Are you out there looking to raise a $76 million today? Is it going to be project financing when you do it? Is it going to be equity financing, combination? Tell us about what's next in terms of, all right, getting this profit into the hands of shareholders.
Well, you know, we've kind of got a bit of a dual approach. We've just recently wrapped up a drilling program, which is actually more exploration focused. For, you know, I'd say our investors are pretty evenly split, where there's half that want to see this thing in a production as soon as possible. The other half is saying, you've got such a big property, you got so many targets, let's drill these things and see how big you can make Red Mountain. So we're trying to kiss both girls to some respect. So we've drilled 4 new targets that we're going to be announcing the results on over the next couple of weeks. But at the same time, on the development side, we are shortly entering the British Columbia environmental assessment process. It's legislated that the time period it takes to receive your permits in British Columbia is 18 months. Due to the location of the project, we're in high alpine. We don't have to deal with any fisheries, salmon fisheries. We're in a pro-development jurisdiction. And what's really importantly is we're in the traditional territory of the Nisga'a First Nation. They are one of the few First Nations in British Columbia that have a settled treaty. So we're working on the social license and the permitting side to get this this project hopefully going next season. So we are looking for strategic investors that would be looking to help us raise the larger figures that would be required to start getting the project advanced to production. But at the same time, we want to demonstrate to the market that we potentially have other economic zones of mineralization. You know, Red Mountain's it's a well-known project in the exploration community, but nobody's ever seen some of the drill holes, even infill results that have come out of this thing. So,
Rob, is the plan to while you're going through the permitting process to also be drilling up these other targets or expanding on the known target?
Yeah, absolutely. Since we're looking at a small high-grade project, the footprint isn't necessarily going to change. If we find other working areas, it would require additional portals and whatnot, but we'd probably still be looking at the same capacity of plant. The tailings facility would go in the same place. The access road would be in the same place. So, you know, if we find more ounces, it's not going to affect our timeline and probably won't affect our the bigger picture project description. So yes, we are trying to pursue both angles to the project right now.
You know, when George, a lot of our audience knows this, and George and I, when we first started, I was writing a lot about what I called how I put companies into buckets. Some I call the zombie companies. They're walking dead. They have no project, no money. There's the dormant companies that maybe they had a project but they weren't working on it, or no money. You know, those are the dormant companies, but they wanted to move forward. And then there's the leaders, and those are companies that, regardless of what the market is doing, their job is to do exactly the kind of things that Rob's just describing. So it's a perfect example of what we have always been trying to promote on the shows, and the kind of companies we talk about on our shows, and why we wanted to invite you on as well, Rob. George, this is a perfect example to me. Leadership.
Yeah. But Rob, let's talk a little bit about the pain side of things, which is the actual markets themselves, the price of equities down out there. And you know, you did your financing at about 45 cents. And your stock today is around 25. No fault of your own, obviously. You've got this downdraft in the markets where it's, you know, babies are being thrown out the bathwater. Does that impact the business very much, or do you just say, hey, we're still a couple of years away from doing what we got to do anyways, and even if we're in a perfect world and we had everything lined up, you're still a couple years away, so no, we're just proceeding with our business plan. How does that impact you, if at all? And if it does, how does it impact you?
Well, you know, I was told by my dad and other mentors, you know, do what's in your control. Our control is to point the drill holes in the right direction. Our control is to get the permitting process underway. Our control is to promote and market the story to anybody that will listen. What the market's going to do and what the gold price is going to do, of course, we're cognizant and we watch it every day. But I can't control if we're going to have a washout like we did in September. But I can get the story out. We're still a retail. IDM is still a great retail story. We've got great retail investors. You know, we need to get up to the sort of that 40 or 50 million market cap range to really start attracting the bigger institutions. We've got a good institutional shareholder base right now, as well as major mining companies. You know, we mentioned Kinross taking us out with Underworld 5 years ago. They've been a big backer of mine to this day. They own a little under 10%, and they participated in every financing. So, you know, you keep your shareholders up to date. Yeah, sure, it's, you know, our share price got hammered. Myself, you know, I'm very confident that we'll be going back in the right direction when things turn. You know, it was a decent summer for the juniors. It was
Yeah.
actually the best couple of months in the past, I'd say, 3 years. So there's an appetite out there. There's still lots of investors that follow the space, and you know, I think we'll turn around at some stage over the next 6 months. So you know, we just, as I say, got to keep on doing what's in our control, advancing and adding value instead of sitting around and waiting for the world to change. You
And
know,
that's why
lots
you're
of
on the show at the end of the day. That's leadership right there, as opposed to just waiting for, you know, you're the tail wagging the dog, as opposed to being the dog waiting for the tail to wag. You're leading it. You're not waiting around for the whole market to turn around and for circumstances to be perfect for you to move the company ahead.
Yeah, if you're an investor, that whole, you know, there's some good undervalued companies out there right now. But if you're buying companies just to be a proxy on the market or on the metal price, maybe you should hold bullion or something instead, right? You know, that's going to have less downside risk.
No, and I'm at the end of the day, Rob. I'm a stock picker, and you know, I like to find great companies because I think that they'll significantly outperform the commodities that they're involved with. And long term, I think George and I are in agreement with how things look as far as long term supply and demand being bullish for gold. And you know, short term, maybe we're going through some turbulence right now. But you know, we don't know what's going to be 2 years down the road. In the meantime, I like to look for companies like this that can make us look like a star.
Yeah, I'm gonna be selfish and say I don't mind downdrafts like this. I actually put this on Twitter today, Al. You saw it, where I said I feel sorry for small cap investors that are panicking and selling things for no apparent reason, but I'm putting together my shopping list and I'm buying. And I got to tell you, IDM at 11, $12 million market cap is silly. What's the risk reward there? You know, I mean, the risk is what, another 30-40% of the downside. Let's say, you know, if things get really bad, so you can lose another 30. But yeah, and Rob, I'm not saying you're subscribed to this, but you know, a 5 to 10x at the end of the day. So 30-40% on the downside, 5 to 10x over the next 2-3 years. That's an easy decision for me to make and put some money to work.
Oh, well, in 2009, 2010, I sure had a lot of regrets for the companies that were trading at pennies, and maybe I should fix them up. But, you know, you look at the company that's trading at 5 cents, and the downside to 2 cents is often a little bit more realistic than upside to 10. But one of these days we're going to be right. As an aside for IDM, today we had a financing become free trading. It was the one we announced with the acquisition of the property. So, you know, the fast money came out flipping the warrants, as they'll often do. I myself don't usually like to sell stock before drill results are out, but you know, you don't worry about the sellers, you worry about the buyers.
Yeah, that's the market. That's
You brought up another point that's really what George and I talk a lot about too is, you know, some companies, they really, because they're stock promotions, they're looking for the hot money all the time. Now that I've got involved with Dunedin Ventures as a special advisor and I'm about to do something similar with gold, I'm actually looking for the cold money. I want that frozen money, the kind of money that's going to back you and say, hey, I'm with these guys for the long haul because this is why I'm buying, and this is where I think we're going to go. And until something changes along there, say something terrible happened, well, then you got to reassess your position. But you know, I like to look for the cold money more than the hot money, Rob.
Oh yeah, well I'm often first in and last out on a lot of these. Put me on
Hey,
your subscriber list.
before we close, I just quickly wanted to get into a little bit of chat about the work that's going on right now. You guys you've ended your drilling season. Now you've got a bunch of results or material in the lab being analyzed. So you'll have a fair bit of news out in between now and next season start, I imagine.
Yeah, correct. So with the current drill program, we're trying to accomplish three things. One is we did do some strategic infill holes within one of the 3 zones that constitute our resource. So we did some infill and basically on the more on the tails to see if we can add some higher grade extension. There's another zone we drilled called the 141 zone, which the previous optioner of the property had a resource estimate on it. We actually pulled that resource out, and I put in a bunch more drill holes because I wasn't confident with the it's widely spaced drill holes. I wasn't really confident in the resource. We hope to add that back in. There's holes like 6 meters of 32 grams that we stepped out from. In fact, one of the step out holes was it was about 120 meters of 3.2 grams per ton. So there's a big wide. That's eerily similar to our underworld discovery hole. And when the project was drilled back in the early 90s, nobody did look at this this sort of lower grade bulk tonnage potential at Red Mountain. It's not honestly a focus for us in a place where you get 20 feet of snow on the ground. You had an open pit mine digging that sort of material out, you'd be mining more snow than rock probably. But we hope to demonstrate the robustness of the system from that. The third area is exploration.
You'd be looking for lenses inside of that larger package of mineralization.
Correct. It's a lower grade halo. We're looking for the high grade sweet spots within there, similar to the Mark AV and JW zones. So the third area, and the area I'm most excited that to drill this year, is called the Cambria Zone, and this is this area that's melted out from under the ice. We have photos on our website that show some of the channel samples across these areas of veins and semi-massive sulfides, which is the same style of mineralization as our main resource area. We've done a bunch of drilling on the Uxlux and Y-loop prospects, and as well as a couple other exploration targets that can show investors the real upside to the Red Mountain project. We also have some good surface numbers to come out as well too over the next month, and then entering the environmental assessment process will also be a newsworthy event.
So in a nutshell, George, you got a great area, really high quality project with past results, moving the project forward. That's why I invited you on, Rob. But I also wanted to mention, George, that one of the things that I really admire about Rob is that most executives of resource companies don't do. He's really active on Twitter. But it's not just, hey, go look at our news kind of tweets. He takes pictures when he's out there working on the ground, so you can see what someone can, instead of reading a bunch of words, they can actually see what he's talking about. I commend you for that, Rob. I hope you continue to do that. I wish more executives of companies would do that, because it really helps the person to see what you're doing.
Yeah, well, it's I'm being from Stewart. I'm really excited about what we could build up there. I want to get this mine built. I'm proud of being from Stewart. I'm proud of my home community there, and it's one of the most spectacular parts of the world. It's really a beautiful area. The geology is, in my opinion, fascinating. And, I'm also sort of an amateur mining historian, as my dad was, for mining in the Stewart area. And, I like to tweet stuff that could be interesting to, as a lot of our investors are. So
why don't you give us your handle? Because I know a lot of people will probably watch this saying, what's his handle? What's his handle?
I'm Goldfinder12.
All right.
That's an easy one to remember.
Yeah, so if you go through some of my old tweets, I got one just as an aside, because I think it's so fascinating in this era of global warming. You go back maybe a few weeks ago, and I actually found it. I was up in camp. I was Googling for a geological map of the Cambria icefield area, and I found that a glaciologist had actually studied this ice sheet that's retreated right adjacent to Red Mountain a couple of years ago and published a very interesting blog on it. And doing some age dating of the glacial till that surrounds this retreated ice sheet, he has deduced that the Bromley Glacier next to Red Mountain over the past 2,500 years has advanced and retreated 4 separate times.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's global warming is a lot more complex than maybe what most of us.
Well, do all your work before it advances again overnight on you or something. Then you're
Yeah,
out in
we'll
the
try and get
cold.
our mind out before we're fighting the ice.
Well, I think that's a great closing note on everything for today's interview, Rob. I enjoy these shows because I spend a lot of time calling companies and talking to the executives, and every time after the conversation, I go, man, I wish that call was on video so our audience could see it. So that's sort of what we do here, and I think you did a wonderful job. You got a great project, and I invite our audience to do your homework on IDM. I don't even think we mentioned the stock symbol yet.
Yeah, a couple times. IDM actually. It's just
Oh,
IDM mining. IDM at the end. The Island David Mary. IDM on the big
It,
board
sta-
TSX.
it stands for Ian and Don McLeod, named after the two poor high school dropout brothers from Stewart that did pretty well in life.
Now you're just gonna make us cry.
Hey, I was
Rob,
doing it. Shameless self-promotion.
even for your shareholders of IDM Mining, I'm sure when you put this out there, we'll tweet it and then you put it out there. I'm sure a lot of them are going to appreciate this kind of engagement, and curious to hear the feedback from them when this is done as well.
Well, we've had a lot of feedback actually from, surprisingly, I shouldn't say surprisingly now. I've gotten quite a few investors just out of Twitter, and I really appreciate the exposure. I think what you guys are doing right now with these video interviews is a great way for other investors to learn about companies. Reading a press release or checking out a website is not a way to learn about management, and to listen to us talk, see if we're full of crap or not. It's I think it's a great venue. So good kudos to you guys for getting this rolling.
Thanks,
yeah,
Rob. Thanks. Really appreciate the fact that you took out the time out of your day. We don't take it for granted. You're busy. You got a company to run. You've got a lot of moving parts there. So the fact that you take the time and give us that opportunity, kudos to you.
Well, looking forward to chatting with you guys once we put some drill results out.
yeah, for sure.
All right, you've been watching Rob McLeod. He's President and CEO of IDM Mining, trades on the big board TSX under the stock symbol IDM. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Be sure to share this with your networks, on your favorite websites, on Agoracom, on Twitter, on Facebook, and get the word out about IDM. Until next time, thanks for joining us. Wishing all of you a fantastic day.